Well, we are continuing in our journey looking at the minor prophets and learning some pretty powerful lessons from their lives. If you have a device that's connected to YouVersion, you can follow along with some of the scriptures we're going to look at today. Otherwise, there is a hard copy of it as well. If you still need one of those, you can wave at us. We'll get one of those to you. Today, we're looking at this man named Obadiah and the book that he wrote. Now, there is about 12 or 13 different people named Obadiah in the Old Testament, and we're not really sure which Obadiah wrote this book because his introduction is so short and to the point. He says, the vision of Obadiah. That's it. We don't have any pedigree from him. There's some prophets that tell us that they were the son of and the son of, or they might even tell us that they were prophesying during the reign of and list a couple of kings. And so because all we know is his name is Obadiah, we don't know anything else, we really can't match him up with any of the other Obadiahs that are listed elsewhere in the Old Testament to know whether this is the same guy or not. The other couple unique characteristics about this book, this is the shortest book in all of the Old Testament. Not the shortest book in the Bible, but the shortest book in the Old Testament. But it's still, as we've said about this series, it packs a pretty powerful punch. There's some great lessons in this short book. Now, because we don't really know the timing of where it's written, there's been a lot of people that have speculated a little bit about this. The other thing that helps or hinders a little bit if you're trying to figure out where to place this thing is that Obadiah is not quoted anywhere directly in the New Testament. Most of the other New Testament or the minor prophets are quoted or at least alluded to in the minor prophets are alluded to in the New Testament, but we don't have that. But here's what we do have. The underlying story, the background story that forms the setting for Obadiah's writing is referred to quite extensively in the New Testament, and especially in the book of Romans. Paul uses it in much the same way that Obadiah does in the lead up to this. And because it's such a well-known story, it's well-rooted in the history of the Old Testament. You can go all the way back to really the opening book of the Bible, and pretty near the beginning of that book, you can see where this story had its origins, and so it has its setting there. There's also a passage in Jeremiah chapter 7 where these section of verses in Jeremiah 7 sound a lot like what Obadiah is writing here. Now, so you could say it both ways. You could say, well, Obadiah was influenced by Jeremiah, or Jeremiah was influenced by Obadiah. They were influencing each other. No, so let me take you back to, this is the chart that I've shared with you before, kind of showing over here in the yellow color on the left side of the screen. This is the the southern tribes of Judah. Over on the right side of the screen in the green is the northern tribes of Israel. And so you can see the kings and the prophets. And you can see I put Obadiah all the way up here, kind of near the top, but I put a question mark because we don't really know. But let me tell you the reasons why that I think that Obadiah goes up there. Some people, the setting of this is that Judah has been invaded and they have some casualties, they have some loss, they have some of their people have been sold into slavery as a result of the invading army. And so a lot of people want to put the date for Obadiah way down here, actually kind of off our chart, after Judah was captured by Nebuchadnezzar. The reason why I don't think that that's the case is because any of the prophets who write after Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians defeated them, they always name him by name. They call them out. They say the Babylonians or Nebuchadnezzar. In this case, Obadiah talks about strangers and foreigners that came into Judah. He doesn't name them, which makes me think that it's probably not Nebuchadnezzar when that takes place. So that's what moves him up here earlier in the date. The other reason why that I think this is the proper date for him is that we are going to be looking at a kingdom called Edom. And you can see over here, King Jehoram is the king that's listed by Obadiah's name. During the reign of Jehoram is when Edom rebelled against Judah when they pulled away from their rule. They were kind of a vassal. They were being overseen by the kings of Jerusalem. And this is when they rebelled, and you can read about it in Chronicles. There's a short passage in there where they rebelled and stepped away. And so it seems like this is the best point to put him in the history line. But the bottom line is, it doesn't really matter where we put Obadiah in this history. It could go anywhere from up here where we have it at 840 or 850 BC all the way down to 586 BC. It could be anywhere in there, and it doesn't really matter. Because this is where a feud that has been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years finally has come to a head. Obadiah is called upon. He's one of only 3 of the minor prophets who's mainly sent by God to prophesy not to Judah or Israel, but to prophesy to one of the neighboring countries. In this case, he's prophesying to Edom. Now, where did Edom come from? We got to trace this all the way back when you are learning about the history of the Israelite people and Father Abraham. God calls Abraham first, and then Abraham and Sarah have a son named Isaac, and Isaac and Rebekah have sons. And so, you will hear people later on, they'll say, I serve the God of my fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Esau. Now, that's not what they usually say, right? Although it should be the case. Here's what the family tree looks like. Here's Abraham over here. So Abraham and Sarah have Isaac, and Isaac and Rebekah have 2 boys, Esau and Jacob. They are twins. Esau is born first. And in this kind of funny way of naming children, when Esau was born, he was very red in color, and so his parents named him Red. That's really what Esau means. They said, hey, look, it's a red baby, Esau. And that's what they named him. Now, his brother, his twin brother that was born after him, just moments after him, he didn't get anything better with his name, because when his older brother, when the red baby was born first, he was born with his younger brother hanging onto his heel. And so they named him Jacob, and that's what Jacob means, is grabbing a hold of the heel. So you can see they were very creative in their naming sometimes. They're like, what do we name him? Well, he's red. Let's just call him that. What about him? Well, he was holding onto his heel, so let's name him holding on to the heel. And that's the names that they came up with. So by right, when a family blessing is passed on, the father passes it on to the firstborn son. So by right, we should say, I serve the God of my fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Esau. That is the way that it should have been. Except that Esau gambled on something and he lost. He came in from hunting one day and he thinks that he's hungry. He thinks that he's hungry. Now, come on. You guys, I'm sure you've had your kids come to you before. Mom, Dad, I'm starving! And you want to say to them, you have no idea what it means to starve, right? I mean, you ate an hour ago. You're not starving.
Right.
Okay, you might be really hungry, but you're not starving. Well, this is Esau, very childlike. I'm starving! And there's Jacob over there stirring some stew. And he goes, Jacob, let me have some of the stew. Jacob, being kind of the clever rascal that he is, said, hey, I'd be glad to give you some of this stew if you'll switch places with me, if you'll let me be the firstborn instead of you be the firstborn. And Esau, I don't know what's going through his mind. I don't know if he's thinking, well, fine, give me the food. I'm going to die. I'm not going to make it longer if you don't give me this food. Or if he was thinking, Dad's never going to go along with this, so sure, I'll tell him whatever. I'll tell Jacob whatever he wants to hear to get this thing. Whatever it is, he foolishly gambled on the fact that things were still going to turn out right for him. But I don't think that he really calculated just how much of a clever rascal Jacob was. And so then Jacob, with the help of his mother Rebekah, they pull a little trick on their father, on Jacob's father, Isaac. He is near the end of his life. His eyesight is failing. And Jacob makes himself look and feel and smell like his brother Esau. And he comes in and gets his father to give the blessing of the firstborn to him instead of Esau. And then Jacob hightails it out of there really quickly. Because when Esau comes back and finds out that this has happened, I like how the message says that Esau seethed in anger against Jacob because of the blessing his father had given him. He brooded. The time for mourning my father's death is close, and then I will kill my brother Jacob. So it's probably good that Jacob hightailed it out of there. Now, if you saw then on this family tree that's here, down below Esau is the Edomites. Those became the descendants of Esau, the Edomites, those that formed the kingdom of Edom that Obadiah is addressing. This began a feud that lasted all the way up until this time that this book is written. The Edomites hated the sons of Jacob, the nation of Israel. They wanted to settle the score. You robbed something from our father, and we're going to get back at you. So after Jacob had gone with Joseph and all of Joseph's brothers down to Egypt, and they lived there quite prosperously for a while, but then when a new Pharaoh came in place, he enslaved all the Israelites. 400 plus years they were in slavery in Egypt. God used Moses and delivered them from there. As they are making their way back to their homeland, back to Canaan, Moses sends messengers to the Edomites, and he says, brothers, because we are brothers, we can trace our family tree right back. We had the same Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Esau. We're all in this together. We're on our way back home. We would like to pass through your territory, but when we do, we're going to stay on the road. We're not going to use any of your food. We're not going to take anything. If our animals happen to stray off the path and eat anything, we'll pay you for it, but we just want to pass through here on our way back home. The Edomites not only said no, but they immediately mobilized their army and stationed them right on the border and said, you're not going to pass through here. We're not going to make it easy for you to get back to your homeland. We hate you. We don't want you to get back to get this. So we're going to block your path. And so the Israelites had to take a much longer route. They couldn't just pass through the land of the Edomites. And as I mentioned earlier, then they were looking for an opportunity. Once David ascended the throne, he really subdued the Edomites in a sense, but brought them under his protection as well. So under David and under Solomon and then under the following kings, they really provided for the Edomites protection and had trade with them. But the Edomites always remained somewhat aloof until we get to this time of Jehoram where they rebelled. They threw that off and said, we're going to be our own people now. You don't have any say in what's happening anymore. And so with that backdrop, then something happens pretty tragic in Judah. There is an invasion. And like I said, in Obadiah chapter 11, he calls them strangers and foreigners that have come in. But listen to how the Edomites responded to this. Verse number 11, it says, on the day, so on this day of invasion, you stood aloof, while strangers carried off his wealth, and foreigners entered his gates and cast lots for Jerusalem. You were like one of them. You should not look down on your brother in the day of his misfortune, nor rejoice over the people of Judah in the day of their destruction, nor boast so much in the day of their trouble. You should not march through the gates of my people in the day of their disaster, nor look down on them in their calamity in their day of disaster, nor seize their wealth in the day of their disaster. You should not wait at the crossroads to cut down their fugitives, nor hand over their survivors in the day of trouble. You can see that what these Edomites did was really take advantage of a situation. Their anger had been seething for so long that now when there's an invasion taking place, not only did they do nothing to stop it, not only did they cheer them on when they were attacking Judah, not only did they take advantage of an opportunity to go in and say, well, here's some land and some possessions that are unprotected, we could go in there and take some plunder for ourselves. Not only did they do all of those things, but when they had an opportunity to kill some of the people who had tried to escape, They cut them down. The people that they didn't kill, they captured and then sold them right back to the invading armies as slaves. And so for all of those things, God commissions Obadiah and says, I have a word for you to speak against the Edomites for what they've done here. It's a very instructive lesson for what took place here. In fact, I'll give you an out. I'll give you a pass. If you want to slip out at this time, you can. If you've never been injured by anybody, nobody has ever slighted you, nobody has ever hurt your feelings, nobody's ever taken advantage of you, you've never been injured by anybody, then the rest of this message probably doesn't pertain to you, so you could just, you could leave, because, but I think that probably every single one of us have had somebody that's offended us, they've hurt us, they've robbed us, they've taken something from us that wasn't theirs, it was ours. And that's exactly what the Edomites did. And there's a very instructive lesson here for every single one of us. So let me show you. It started off with Edom's pride. Right at the very beginning of the book, Obadiah says, speaking for God, see, verse number 2, I will make you small among the nations. You will be utterly despised. The pride of your heart has deceived you. You who live in the clefts of the rocks and make your home on the heights. You who say to yourself, who can bring me down to the ground? They were a very proud people, and rightly so. Let me just show you this pass right here, and down at the bottom of this cavern is the path, the road that takes you in to Edom. The cliffs surrounding the side in a lot of spots are 2,000 feet high. It's a pretty tough place to march an army through there, because you've got to march them through in close to single file, and the people that are well protected up on the rocks can just rain down the weapons of destruction on you. So they said, who's going to get us here? In fact, you can see this is such rugged terrain that they even, when they built their homes and their buildings, they built them, just carved them right outside, right into the rocks themselves. I mean, there's no windstorm that's going to blow this over. They don't have to worry about it. So when he says, you have such pride, you think, man, we're up here. We've scaled the cliffs. We've scaled the heights. Nobody could ever touch us up here. But then God goes on to say, though you soar like the eagle and make your nest among the stars, from there I will bring you down, declares the Lord. If thieves came to you, if robbers in the night, oh, what a disaster awaits you. Would they not steal only as much as they wanted? Then he goes on to say, when I come with this judgment, the judgment is going to be worse than you can bear. Their pride brought them down. Their pride that said, I have to even the score. Now, think about this. This has taken place hundreds and hundreds of years later. None of these people were there when Jacob and Esau had this rift. And so what they're really saying is, because of what you did to my father's father, however far back it goes, I am going to make things right. I am going to be the one to even the score here. You talk about arrogance, you talk about pride. To say, I'm the one, after these generations, I'm going to bring it to a conclusion. C.S. Lewis pretty well summed it up. He said, pride is spiritual cancer. It eats up the possibility of love or contentment or even common sense. I mean, okay, common sense. Let's think about this. Pastor Josh and I deal with this all the time when we work with middle schoolers. One kid gets pushed by another kid, or somebody says something to him. The next guy comes, when he responds a little bit more. And then we usually step in there and go, what did you think was going to happen? I mean, let's use some common sense here. You know, when he said something hurtful to you and you came back and said something hurtful to him or pushed him back, did you think that he was going to go, oh, I realize the error of my ways now. I am totally sorry. Please forgive me. I'll never do that again. Of course not. He's going to escalate it to the next level, which means you're going to escalate it, which means you're... So exactly how is it that you're going to even the score? How exactly are you going to balance things out? But pride eats up, as C.S. Lewis says, even your common sense. You're not even thinking this thing through because our pride can get us so tunnel vision on the offender, on the one that hurt us, that we don't see anything else, we don't think about anything else. We're just focused in on that person that hurt us. And that's what was happening with the Edomites. The next thing that happens to not only the Edomites, but to us as well, is we begin to plot in our mind our revenge. You know, I can't wait to see what's going to happen to them. I hope they get fired from their job. I hope that they have to file bankruptcy. I hope they get in a car accident. I hope, we start plotting all this stuff. I mean, you hurt me, and so you need to, somebody's got to hurt you. Somebody's got to rip you off the way that you ripped me off. And so I hope this happens to you. And we begin to plot it in our minds. And here's the Edomites. For years, they're up here. They think that they're safe in these cliffs. And they're looking down at Israel going, I can't wait till somebody gets them. I can't wait. And so, then we read those verses already. Then Obadiah says, on that day when strangers were coming in and doing all this kind of stuff, you just stood aloof. You're just like, you deserve it. You deserve it. It's, that's what's coming. Jesus told us we need to be really careful about those thoughts. He says, you've heard it said, it was said to the people long ago, you shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. And now listen to this. He says, if you're even plotting it, but I tell you that anyone who's angry with his brother or sister will be subject to judgment. When you start going, yeah, you got to get that. Somebody's going to get you back for this, and this is going to happen, and this better. And you start thinking that you better be careful. You're putting yourself on a very slippery slope. So that's where the Edomites started out. It was all just in their minds. But then they moved a step farther, and they began to cheer on the people that were attacking the Israelites. There's a cliche that people use sometimes, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Right? You're getting that guy that I don't like. So even though you're despicable, even though you're really not a very nice person, I'm your buddy right now because you're getting that guy. You're getting that bad guy that got me. So good job, go for it. And that's what he said. Not only did you stand aloof, you started looking down on him. He says, in the day of his misfortune, you were rejoicing over what was happening. You're saying, good, they deserve it. They should have gotten this thing. And then, ultimately, what happens is that our revenge begins to be enacted on. We begin to act out. We begin to take matters into our own hands. The Edomites saw an opportunity. They saw an opening. They said, hey, this area right here, the soldiers aren't there anymore because they're distracted somewhere else. And now we can go in there and we can steal. We can take something back from them. Why? Did they steal it from you? What did they steal from? But you're trying to balance the scales. You're making yourself the judge and the jury and saying, you're guilty and this is the penalty that you owe me. This is what you got to pay back to me. And so not only did they start cheering on the enemies, but then as I read there, it says they began to cut down the people, the fugitives that are trying to run away. And then they handed over the survivors. They caught some of the people and said, we're going to sell you as slaves to these people that are attacking. How did you get to that spot where you would actually start doing that? Well, remember, Jesus said it starts in our minds, but then look what he says. It's out of the heart that come these evil thoughts: murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony, slander. When somebody hurts us, somebody robs us of something that we think that we should have had, when we appear to be innocent, even not that Jacob was at all innocent in this, but we might say, hey, you know what? I don't deserve this thing. Got to be very careful that we don't start down this same path of saying, you know what? They deserve to have a punishment, and I'm the one that's going to make sure that they get it. I'm gonna watch them. I'm gonna wish for things. Oh, I wouldn't actually do anything to them, but I'm just gonna kind of daydream about it a little bit. Like, how sweet is this going to be when this finally happens, when they finally get theirs? We've got to be so careful about those thoughts. Because think about this. Again, like I said, how far removed were the Edomites at this time from the actual event with Jacob and Esau? Their father. And that had been passed on. I mean, think about this, that fathers had been saying to their sons for generations, even on their deathbeds maybe saying, hey, wasn't able to take place in my lifetime, but hopefully, son, in your lifetime, you can even the score. Avenge your dad. Well, what happened to you, Dad? Well, nothing happened to me, but I was trying to avenge my grandpa. Well, what happened to Grandpa? Well, nothing, but he was trying to avenge his grandpa. Well, what happened to his grandpa? Well, nothing, but he was trying to... And it's become this legacy that's been passed on from generation to generation. And it gets more and more toxic as it goes along. But it started in our thoughts. When we start to think those things, we got to remember that it was God who said, it is mine to avenge. I will repay. In due time, their foot will slip, their day of disaster is near, and their doom rushes upon them. God says, I haven't missed a thing. I keep perfect record books. Now, you might not actually see it in your lifetime, but that's okay. God hasn't forgotten about it. If you do see God's judgment, or what you might perceive to be God's judgment, fall on somebody, again, carefully guard your thoughts. Because this is what Proverbs tells us. Don't rejoice when your enemies fall. Don't be happy when they stumble. For the Lord will be displeased with you and will turn his anger away from them. Think about it. Right when you're going, yeah, they're finally getting it. God goes, no, not anymore. Let God handle it. Let God handle it. Our focus has got to be on our own relationship with Jesus. Again, here's what his words are to us. Will not God bring about justice for his chosen ones who cry out to him day and night? Will he keep putting them off? I tell you, he will see that they get justice, and quickly. However, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth? Will he find you faithful to him, or will he find you like the Edomites, brooding over, seething over, well, when's the justice going to come? And this is what it better look like. And God, you better do, and this has got to happen to them. And then when somebody else steps in, you go, oh yeah, good, somebody else is getting... Where's your focus? Your focus is on them. I hate to burst your bubble, but you're spending a whole lot of time thinking about the person who wronged you, and they probably aren't thinking about you at all. Mm-hmm. You're spending all this creativity, all of this time and energy thinking about them, and they're not thinking about you. So don't do it. Take your hands off of it and say, God, you're the one who's going to bring back this justice. And I realize it could have been a slight insult. You go, well, yeah, that one's easy to get rid of. I can forget about that one. They were just kind of being stupid. There's some bad people that have done some horrendous, unspeakable, absolutely inexcusable things to you. And you say, it's inexcusable. You're right. It is inexcusable. So let me give you one more quote from C.S. Lewis. To be a Christian means to forgive the inexcusable because God has forgiven the inexcusable in you. Our rebellion against God, our sin against him, unforgivable, inexcusable. I mean, think about it this way. Yes, what they did against you was inexcusable. But could you honestly say that your life had been perfect? You've never made a mistake? You've never done something wrong and there maybe God needed to give some justice to your life? And yet, God is perfect. He's never done anything wrong. Jesus lived a perfect life. And look how he died. Look what they accused him of as they put him on a cross. And yet, hanging there on the cross, Father, forgive them. They don't realize what they're doing. They don't realize how they're railing against a perfect person. To forgive the inexcusable in someone else is possible because God has forgiven the inexcusable in each one of us. And so, if I could sum up what Obadiah's warning is to the Edomites, that us, if we've been wronged by somebody, I'd sum it up with just 3 words. Let it go. Let it go. It's too heavy of a burden for you to carry. It's too corrosive to your heart and your mind. It'll begin to twist you in all these different ways. Let it go. Yes. Because God has let go of the sin against you. The moment that you have done the inexcusable against him and you ask for forgiveness, he lets it go. So much so that he said later on, if you say, forgive me of that, he goes, of what? It's not only forgiven, it's forgotten. He separates us from our sins as far as the east is from the west. He doesn't remember them anymore. Amazing that the all-knowing God chooses to forget. And so he says the same thing to us. Let it go. Here's how Paul tells us to let it go. Romans chapter 12, do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everybody. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Do not take revenge, my friends, but leave room for God's wrath. For it is written, it is mine to avenge. I will repay, says the Lord. And then Paul completely flips it on its head. Something that only people who have let it go can do. On the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. In doing this, you will heap burning coals on his head. And I like the last verse out of the New Living Translation. Do not let evil conquer you, but conquer evil by doing good. Yes. Don't let evil conquer you. Edom doesn't exist as a kingdom anymore. Ultimately, their judgment did come. They've been completely wiped out, completely annihilated. Don't let that happen. Don't be conquered by evil, but conquer evil. Let that go. Forgive the inexcusable, because as you turn your eyes toward heaven, you realize that God has forgiven the inexcusable in you. Yes. In just a couple of moments, we're going to share in communion together. And the reason why I wanted to close with a time of communion today is because Paul especially calls on us in 1 Corinthians to use communion as a time of reflection, for us to examine our own hearts. And as we're taking those elements that symbolize Christ's forgiveness of the inexcusable in us, it's a really good time for us to examine our hearts and minds and say, is there something that I haven't let go yet? Is there a place where I'm still, maybe it's even in the back of my mind, but I'm waiting for them to get theirs. I'm waiting for the scales of justice to be balanced out there. I'm waiting for that person that injured me to be injured themselves, to have that payback. It's time to let it go. It's time to let it go. Would you bow your heads with me? Lord, you have forgiven the inexcusable in us. You died on a cross in our place. It was our sins that you died for. It wasn't because of anything that you did wrong. And so, God, would you examine our hearts right now? And my friend, if you are here in this room or you're watching this broadcast or watching at a video later on, and you haven't asked Jesus to forgive you of your sins, today can be a brand new day. You can know what it is to have this weight removed from your heart and your mind, because God wants to forgive the inexcusable. When you rebelled against His holiness and His perfection and His love, He's done nothing but extend love to you. Yes. Today's the day that you can Invite him in. Because Jesus paid the penalty for your sins, my friend. So you can pray a prayer simply something like this. God, I acknowledge I've pushed away your love. I acknowledge I have sinned against you by doing the inexcusable against a perfect, loving God. But I also acknowledge that Jesus paid that penalty for my sin by dying on the cross and satisfying your justice, God. And because of that, I can ask for forgiveness. So remove my sin from me as far as the east is from the west. Give me a brand new beginning as I turn my life over to you.
Thank you.
And know that my sins are canceled and gone. We're going to celebrate